we have even more detail since we posted that video, and it's been a couple days, so I'm sure you've already, if you're listening to this, have seen the report that Maxim Tsyplakov and the Islanders are working on an extension. But something we haven't talked about is his agent was pretty abrupt or blunt with how, like, what they're looking to get, which is rare. You don't really see that. We talk about hockey culture. You don't really see that in hockey culture, and especially not with Lou Lamoriello. But he was on a Russian podcast, and essentially he was asked like vet minimum, like $1 million kind of on the next deal. And he said 3 times that. So talks roughly $3 million, which I think makes sense based on what we were talking about the other day.
Yeah, well, Pierre Engvall is getting $3 million. We were figuring somewhere around 3.5 and 4. And as I'm on Cap Wages, they have this AFP analytics, which I guess does like contract projections. And cool. They've got 4 years by 4.918 for Max Tsyplakov, which is high. That's too high. But I think if if Pierre Engvall is getting $3 million and the cap is going up like crazy, it's fair to say that Maxim Tsyplakov is going to get $3 million. I think that's fair. I'm not saying he's worth it, although if he's producing half a point per game, you got to factor somewhere around $3 to $4 million for him. If every 10 points, as I said in the YouTube video, is $1 million, that seems fair to me.
It does seem fair. You said every 10 points on a YouTube video is $1 million. I'm sorry. I wanted to keep rolling with it. That's bad co-hosting, but that was too funny not to point out. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Absolutely. Point out when I say something stupid. It makes it more entertaining because, most of us in the media business, we espouse to be like, I am always right. And everything I say out of my mouth is the God's honest truth. And it's not that I'm lying out here, obviously. It's like sometimes we misspeak. It is really funny.
If you've been with us long enough, I think listening that neither Mitch or I take ourselves too seriously. We like to have fun with this, and I think that's part of the reason why we have a good show and a good dynamic here. So yeah. I'm glad that we could do that. We could clip. We'll clip that. That'll be our clip this week. But I do agree. That's usually for forwards what you're looking at. He's pacing out for just under 40 points this year, and you take that. To me, I think that's he's a good third line player. Maybe in a pinch can play on your second line. Middle six, I'm comfortable calling it. I don't think he's a fourth liner. I don't know if he's good enough for a first line role. But if you can get a 26-year-old, sign him for 2 or 3 years for his age 27, 28, maybe 29 season, I'm in on that. I'm not that, you don't have to go crazy long term and overpay. That feels like good value. And the Islanders, as we've discussed, need some good value contracts on their books.
Yeah, and at 4.9, this is the projected AFP analytics cap hit. That's only 5.15% of the cap, which is less than what Jean-Gabriel Pageau is currently on at 5.7. Of course, we both agree that 4.9 is way too high. We should not be paying this guy $5 million a year for 4 years. That's just too much. But if you're somewhere around $3 to $4 million, well, $4 million, you're now getting into the Anthony Duclair situations in terms of cap hit, not just the actual number, but the percentage of the cap devoted to this player. 4% of your cap for a guy who's going to sit in your middle six is not a bad contract to give out at all.
No.
It's then going to depend on how long. Even with that, you're talking about a 26-year-old, right? Like he's 26 now, but he'll turn 27 in September. Yeah. September 19th. So you've got time to see out the peak of this contract before it kind of doesn't look, maybe it doesn't even look great, is not even a good way of saying, because we're only talking about 4% of the cap, but before the latter years of the contract, if you will, before age becomes, let's say, a concern, perhaps. So you've got quite a while. Ideally, we're not giving this guy 7 years or 8 years. That would be ridiculous. But if you're talking yourself into $3 to $4 million over 4 years, that's not a bad deal at all, in my opinion.
No, I don't think so either. And that brings him to what, 30 or 31 at that point?
Yeah.
Not an issue for me. I think I'm not going to go as far to say like he's a part of the core and like,
no,
but I don't know, you need role players. And if you have a decent role player at $3 million to $4 million in your middle six, like, okay.
Yep. You filled out your middle six with decent value. Now, I'm not going to say that I want him to sign by 4 years by $4 million. Ideally for me, 3 to 3.5 over 2. Give him a bridge deal, because we don't know if this is some sort of anomaly.
Yep.
It is quite like the sample size is a lot more than what we saw out of Pierre Engvall, right? It was 18 games and scored 9 points, and then Lou signs him to a 7-year deal. But with Maxim Tsyplakov, he's already played 51 games, scored 25 points. What you've seen out of him is sustainable, and maybe he gets a little bit more as he grows a little bit more comfortable with the game going into next year, or even in the latter portion of this season. So maybe you see more out of that, out of those 25 points in terms of production. So there's possibility to get more out of him. I still want to sit at 2 years. That's where I'm at.
That's fair, and that would be my preference as well. I think is 2 years, because then you could reevaluate. Like, you can sign him again if you want to after that, and not. Yeah. I'm not saying okay, then you go to 7 years at 29. No, but if you wanted to do another, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, you could. If you're in a spot where it makes sense, then okay, do it, and that means he lived up to his contract, which is obviously a good thing. I do. While you were talking on things that like more time in the league next year might do him good and he can get better. Something else that I think would work is him kind of getting a role and staying there. He's moved around the lineup a ton, and a lot of guys have because of injuries or not performing, right? So you can make that case with just about anybody. But I'd really like to see whether Pajot's here long-term or not is obviously TBD. I'd assume no. But Tsyplakov and Holmstrom, like, kind of locked in as your third-line wingers for the next couple of years. I'm totally game with that. Yeah,
and then maybe Brock as your third liner. It seems that might be what Lou's trying to do. Lock in Brock Nelson for a couple of years, and keep him as your third liner as you try to move Jean-Gabriel Pajot. Because you can retain Brock for probably $5 million going forward, right? Maybe a little bit more because, again, the salary cap is going up. But if you're replacing Brock Nelson or Jean-Gabriel Pajot with Brock Nelson, that seems like a win.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. The age factor does concern me a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you. And my preference would still be to trade him because of what you would recoup in a deal like that. Yeah. But throw that out, which is, again, hard to do in a conversation that needs nuance. But if we're just looking at Brock Nelson 3C in a vacuum, not horrible.
Yeah. Just going back to the number of years on Tsyplakov, like, he might not want to sign something longer than 2 years as well. Right. He's, as we said, 26 now, turning 27 in September. Well, the cap is only going up every year. True. And if he does well, that $3 million can turn into $6 million really friggin' quick by 2 years from now, whether that's with the Islanders or not, because he'll be an unrestricted free agent at that point.
If you like that, make sure to subscribe to Up the Turnpike on Patreon for more exclusive New York Islanders content.